Now, the cost of childcare is just one of things in Connecticut that ranks the most expensive in the country. It will likely be a hot topic in the race for governor. Former New Britain Mayor Erin Stewart officially kicked off her campaign for the state's top job this week at New Britain Stadium. She'll face off against State Senator Ryan Fazio for the Republican nomination. Governor Lamont will face off against State Rep Josh Elliott for the Democratic nomination. Erin Stewart, as you got a sneak peek, joins me now. Good to see you. It's been a long time.
Good to see you too, Mike.
So why'd you decide to get in the race for governor now?
Well, first off, it's like pulling at my heartstrings talking about childcare, because with a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, boy, do I feel that day in and day out.
Yeah, right?
Oh, gosh.
Every day. And then trying to balance your job with the two. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the driving factors for me being in this race for governor right now. You know, I truly believe it's time for something different, someone who comes from a different world, a different background, just something new and fresh. And, you know, this is not my first rodeo. I ran in 2018 unsuccessfully. I learned a lot about what to do differently. But since then, I've had this 12-year amazing career as mayor of a city, an urban center in Connecticut. So a lot of these issues, like talking about childcare and healthcare options, you know, they hit close to home for me. And I want to bring a lot of change.
So I'm going to ask you a question about that. Overall, though, let's talk about affordability. That's been a buzzword for Republicans and Democrats here in the state, nationally. You know, people are looking at the cost of groceries. People are looking at the cost of rent, electric rates. Electric rates continue to be among the highest in the country. How do we, if you were to get the state's top job, make our state more affordable for all of us?
It's a cornerstone of my campaign. There's no doubt about that. I mean, in my first ad that I put out, we talk about the high electricity rates, the highest cost of living in, you know, one of the highest cost of livings in the nation. You know, you've got to talk about right-sizing state government, lowering taxes, and making it affordable. But the question is, what does affordability actually mean? Everybody's using it as a buzzword right now. We're hearing it across the board.
But it can be vague depending on how you use it.
Very much so. But affordability for a city, you know, like New Britain, or let's say a neighborhood in Hartford, like Frog Hollow, affordability there is very different than affordability in, let's say, Wallingford.
Right.
So we have to look at things from a very different lens when we talk about affordability across the state. Bottom line is, spend less. We're overtaxing people. I feel very strongly about that. We got to return money to our taxpayers in the form of lots of tax relief.
So you're thinking property taxes? Are you thinking car taxes? What would you like to see proposed?
All of it is on the table. We got to talk about restructuring our tax structure in Connecticut, because it's not fair. I dealt with that for many years as mayor of the city of New Britain, looking at an inequitable tax system that I do think desperately needs to change. Again, all things that fuel why I'm running and will feed into my platform that I'll be coming out with as we go through the campaign. Touched a little bit on it at our big event last night.
Right.
I was there with about 300 of my closest friends. But we started outlining these things, the problems that I see across Connecticut, and how I would like to fix it.
So the tax code will be an especially big challenge, because we have among the highest earners in the whole country and the lowest earners in the whole country. So the income gap is huge, which means you see billionaires paying 10, 12, 13% in taxes, and you see a teacher paying upwards of 20-something, 30-something. So
you're right.
How do you start on that?
You know, I've been involved with, let's say, Connecticut Conference of Municipalities for a long time. And one of the things that they have always talked about and looked at is restructuring our tax code, right? Making it even. Looking at across the board. How can you just make this even across the board for
like a flat
everyone?
Tax, or are you talking about a graduate tax?
Sure, flat. I mean, you know, details, devil's in the details, right? But what you have to do is you just have to make it fair across the board. But we also have so many different loopholes for our structure. There's a million different things that, okay, you can take you can deduct for this, or you can deduct for that. We've got to get rid of that. We go in and we create all these laws, and the legislature creates all these laws that have all these loopholes. That's why people are confused. That's why it's a pain in the butt to do your taxes every year.
Right.
We can do things with government to make it more simpler, and I think that that's going to be a big piece of what I stand for as well.
So back to the affordability thing. You're a working mom. You have 2 small kids, not just kids, small kids, which are way more labor intensive, being a dad of 2, I understand.
Thank you.
So we understand, as we talked at the top of the segment, how expensive daycare can be.
Yeah.
The Lamont administration came up with this endowment fund to deeply discount childcare, make it even free for some. Is that something you would like to see continue, or do you have another way you would like to see making specifically childcare more affordable, because if you make childcare more affordable, we can start filling these 90,000 jobs that we have open here in Connecticut right now.
Listen, you don't have to talk to me about the struggles with this, because I look at that at my own kids' daycare every day, where the staff just kind of ebbs and flows. They're coming and going because you can't pay them enough. These nonprofits can't pay people enough to do daycare or preschool. Listen, you know, the fund that the governor created, it was a good step towards that, but it's not giving anybody relief right now. Right now is where parents are struggling. They can't afford it now, not 4 or 5 years from now once this fund grows. So, okay, great step, but how is that providing relief in the immediate? And that's something that should be looked at.
So, and that could be tax relief, or
it could be. You got to look also at the Care for Kids program, another program that, you know, hasn't been adequately funded, but yet then daycares don't get reimbursed in time. So then the cost falls on the parents that already can't afford it, and they're working. These are working parents who are just scraping by, working moms to make ends meet. You've got to look at simplifying these
So do you
programs.
create a working group to try to do that? Obviously, you have skin in the game because you have two little kids in daycare. So, I mean, that's something that, you know, the state could address as a group of lawmakers, a group of
Absolutely, but you know, I think one of my frustrations with lawmakers right now is that they spend a lot of time thinking and talking instead of just doing. And you know, I've had 12 years of just doing it and getting it done. So less talk, more action.
So what do you think about the way the state deals with our surpluses? We have $1 billion surplus every single year. A lot of it's been paying down debt. We've paid down a significant amount of debt.
We have.
But other people say, look, our schools aren't funded enough. Our nonprofits who take care of mental health and addiction services aren't funded enough. Should we rebalance the way we use that money, or should we keep using it all or as much as we can to pay down that long-term pension debt?
I think one thing's very clear. When you have massive surpluses like that annually, you're overtaxing people. And so I think we should be giving back as much as possible to the Connecticut taxpayers who could use that money and then put it back into our economy in their own ways, because you're putting money back into our pockets. There's no doubt about that. But yes, their investments need to be made in education desperately. Investments need to be made in infrastructure. So it certainly should be looked at. But what I don't believe in is giving the governor a $500 million blank check annually to just get to spend it on whatever he wants, because I think that's insulting to the Connecticut taxpayers.
So first and foremost, you sound like you keep repeating the tax cut.
No doubt about it.
All right, so last question. I got about 30 seconds. During your time as mayor, you've had public spats with how things are funded. I remember you saying at one point, we're pumping so much money towards education, but our test scores aren't going anywhere.
Yes.
You were upset with that. How do you look at education moving forward? I mean, obviously, New Britain spends about $23,000 a kid every year, but the test scores aren't moving. How do you fix that?
Test scores are moving slowly. A lot of it starts with, you know, having good management. I'm feeling good about New Britain school management, even though they're still at the bottom. But it just goes to show you that money doesn't always fix the problems that you have. But what I do believe in very strongly is school choice. And I think that's going to be a big piece of what we talk about in this campaign, where you have haves and have-nots in this state. You have great school systems in our suburban areas. In our urban areas, they struggle. But a mom in New Britain or Hartford or Bridgeport should be able to pick the best school to send their kid at if their kid is failing.
I got to leave it there. Erin Stewart,
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.